Today's Intern Whisperer employer tip of the week is one way to make your training more inclusive is let your trainees, the people in your company, take the lead every now and then. Ask each learner to talk and share their knowledge. A bit about their personal lives will boost cooperation and inclusion. To do this, you can use short presentations. For example, in each training session or at your team meetings, ask another team member to do some research and talk for 5 minutes about whatever that day's topic is. You can do this at stand-up meetings. You can also let somebody else lead the meeting. This way, you simultaneously encourage independent learning and socialization. We are welcoming John Crossman to the Intern Whisperer, and he is the founder of Crossmark Services. He is also the founder of a podcast that we're going to talk about a little bit later, and another company, Crossman, Career Builders. So all of this is what's coming up here. I want to just say welcome, John, to the show. I'm very excited.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here with you.
Yeah, well, I had selected you to be a guest because before the show started, it was all because I've been following you a lot on social media.
It's called stalking, by the way. That's what they call that.
It is, but stealth mode, but not really. I like it. And I would make comments and things like that, but visible stalking online, I guess it's accepted.
It's okay.
Now.
It's totally cool.
Right?
It's welcome.
Yeah. So you're over here in the same space as myself, careers, skills, all of these wonderful things. And that's one of the reasons why I invited you on the show. So let's kick it off with, tell us 5 words that describe you and why.
Okay. So my 5 words would be loving, caring, vulnerable, generous, and overwhelming. And by the way, it's funny. I usually lead with overwhelming because whenever I'm interviewing somebody or trying to work with somebody, that comes up common, like as a criticism of me, just because, you're the same way, when you're an entrepreneur and you have lots of ideas, like a traditional CEO type, you don't see yourself as overwhelming, you see yourself as passionate. But to a lot of people,
that's the positive word they use to describe it. Right.
So I've had to learn to be discerning and pull back. And I tend to want to share everything with everybody, partly because I'm trying to be a vulnerable person and I'm trying to be a generous person, but I've had to learn to kind of pull that back a little bit so as to not overwhelm people unnecessarily.
I get it. I think that passionately productive is one of the words that I've used also to describe myself, because it's like, yeah, there's a lot that we're trying to do in this world where we leave a mark, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I had a family member and I were talking about this recently, and they were saying that their spouses, family members tend to be kind of like normal people and they all get along really well. And they were talking about our family, about how we have some high achievers, but we don't always get along. And I called the person back a little later. I said, I was thinking about that sometimes anger gets a bad rap. Sometimes people just want to shove anger's wrong. Well, anger a lot of times comes out of passion. It comes out of caring. If we're angry about human trafficking and we're so angry, we're gonna get stopped that, right? I mean, a lot of great movements have been based in passion. They come across as anger, but anger is not always a bad word. I think it can be a very good word because it can help change, and stop injustices.
I like the fact that you see anger. A lot of people might see it as something that's a negative word. And for the most part, it does evoke that type of thoughts for sure.
Right.
But anger in families doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It can be, that's just how the family communicates.
True.
And it could be loud voices. It could be things where they just want to feel like their voice is being heard. But it doesn't mean that they don't get along.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
I had a grandmother and my mom, and I could go outside. It was always whatever one person would say, the other one would say the opposite. And I could go, oh, wow, what a beautiful day. And my grandmother might look at it and go, there's an awful lot of clouds up there. I don't know. Doesn't look so great. But it was just how we would have conversation. It took me a while to figure that out. So I think that the reason why maybe it's not so much anger, I'm not in your family, so I don't know.
Right.
But it could be that's how the conversations tend to go, is because it's oppositional.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also I think that if you break that down, there's cultural issues, there's different ways people communicate. But there's also, I think, a deeper thing is sometimes it's wounding.
Oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
people are wounded, and sometimes you're hearing anger, and it's hard to understand where it's coming from. Sometimes when I'm talking to people, it's like anger is a very surface level emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to help people sometimes, particularly in a work environment, sometimes people in a work environment can come across angry,
Mm-hmm.
but if you sort of work through it, maybe what that's really come is fear. And then
Always.
the fear could be something really helpful,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I recently had an attorney who was, in my opinion, coming a little too strong with me. I didn't really like it, but I was really trying to look through it, and what I could see is that they had some fear about some risk they thought that I was taking, and so I kind of was able to work it through better. But those
Mm-hmm.
are hard skill sets. Look, I mean, healthy relationships, part of it's having boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then communicating well, and all that stuff's hard, whether it's business or in families.
Yeah. And you raise again a really interesting point of view is that sometimes that anger, it's just a mask. It's hiding what
Mhm.
you said is fear. And I would totally agree with you because people don't want to have their, be caught with their pants down, so to speak.
Mhm.
They want to be able to look like they are intelligent or whatever it is that they're trying to live up to in their own head, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, for
for sure.
sure. This is, oh, yeah. Now we have to say, there's some kind of a saying when two people say the same thing, you got to buy somebody
I
a
don't know.
Coke.
It's
I don't know
hard.
what that is.
I don't know.
But anyway, it was funny. We both said the same thing. I think we're like-minded for sure. So explain those words. I think you covered quite a bit, but you had said passionate. So where does that come from?
Well, I said loving and caring, and I
Mhm.
sort of put those there. And I think that really comes out of my faith,
Mhm.
that I really do believe in my faith, and I really do believe in the importance of loving people.
Mhm.
Somebody
Despite everything, right?
right.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think we're called to love our enemies. I think we're called to love
Absolutely.
people that can't love us back. And it's interesting. Somebody the other day was telling me that they feel like I'm too generous. And I was like, well, gosh, maybe I should try the opposite. And I was like, well, that's just not going to work. It just doesn't feel who I call to be. That said, I do have to be thoughtful about expressing my own feelings and
Mhm.
sometimes saying no to people. Because what happens is that I've gotten in situations where I've been generous, and then I just get frustrated and I cut off a relationship.
Mhm.
And so I need to be more knowledgeable on my own mind and on the front end, because some people just ask and ask and ask. So I do desire to be loving and caring and generous, but I can't do everything. I have to say no to
Yeah.
stuff for sure. And then the other one was vulnerable, and I try to lead a lot of times with my feelings and what I'm going through in my own journey. And that's a way to be relatable. And,
Mhm.
one example that would be is I did a podcast or webinar last year, and it was about race, and it was myself and 3 Black women. And as I was getting prepared and looking at my notes, I'm like, gosh, this could really come across bad. Like,
Right.
what's this white guy? And I'm a tiny bit Black, but not people would not acknowledge me that way. So I need to be thoughtful about that. So when we started the interview, one of the women on the panel talked about trauma. And so I leaned in on that. I said, I do not know what it's like to be a Black woman. I do know trauma. I do know I have suffered from clinical depression. I have had anxiety issues. I've been on meds before. I have been through trauma. And so when somebody talks in a language of like they've experiencing something hard, and I say, man, me too, and we can connect, that whole interview went fantastic.
Mhm.
But it was my vulnerability that
Mhm.
helped connect it. And I also think that, look, some weirdos want to go talk to college students and tell them about when I did this deal, I made $1 million. And I guess that's exciting for some students to hear. They want to hear that, maybe. But at the same time, like, I think a lot of students, even if they're at a great university and they never had to be their whole life, they're scared and they're worried. And I think to be able to tell them like, hey, I get scared, I get worried too. And these are the tools I use to do my job.
Mhm.
These are the same tools you can use now. I just think that relatability makes for better teaching.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that the ability, some people on social media, they share everything on social media. And sometimes I think, you could dial it back just a little bit
Right.
because I question their motives, not because they're sharing, but I question their motives. What is it that they're wanting out of it? Because if it's attention, then that may not be the best outlet for it.
Well, you're
If
right.
it's there to educate others, totally support that.
Well, that you're talking about discernment, right?
Mhm.
That's just discernment, because there's certain things in my life that I struggle with that need to be shared only with my wife or my children or
Mm-hmm.
core people in my life. There's no business in that sharing at a public forum.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things that's okay, right? There are some dynamics in my own family issues that I don't share because I know that it could be hurtful to somebody in my family. So I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
share that, right? And that's discernment. So it's finding the right place. And you're right. Some people do way overshare. And then I think you're right. Sometimes they're just trying to get reaction.
Right.
And you're right. I don't know that that's helpful. So context matters and discernment matters.
Mm-hmm. We probably have the same faith, but I'll throw a book out there. One of my most favorite top 3 books is The Purpose Driven Life.
Mm-hmm.
The first sentence is, "It is not all about you."
Right.
And I adopt that. I put that, cut it out. It's like really big on my vision board.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that is my constant reminder of, it is not about me. And then I come back and I'll push on it a little bit because I go, but yet it is,
Mm-hmm.
because it is us as an individual that can actually change somebody's day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yep. Anyway, I love those 5 words. And then also how you neatly tied it all together into a nice little bow there.
Try to.
So where did you grow up? I don't know if you're from here, but also where did you go to school and how did you get to where you are? You and I share something else. We're both serial entrepreneurs. So, we are extremely driven people. I'm going to guess you were firstborn in your family.
No.
Really, I am.
I'm the youngest.
Holy cow. You're breaking all of those.
I know.
Those rules.
So to understand me is to understand this. My father was a pastor and civil rights leader.
Okay.
So I grew up in a very unique household. And
which denomination?
Methodist.
Okay.
And the thing about it, growing up in that environment, they've done studies of pastors' kids and lawyers' kids and doctors' kids, and consistently preachers' kids, pastors' kids outperform doctors' kids and lawyers' kids. And I think the reason why is that when you grow up in a pastor's household, you grow up in an educated household, right? So we grew up in a household that was about reading books and about knowing history and knowing context of things. And, that was really valued. The second thing is you grow up in a household that's very purpose driven, like Rick Warren would say. And, when something was happening in the news, we were involved in it. We were not people that just sat and watched it, like we leaned in on it. So that was a big deal. The third thing, though, is like we were working class folks. One way to describe it is when you're a preacher's kid, you're around people of affluence and you're in a family of influence that doesn't have affluence. And so that can mess you up or it can impact you. And so in a positive way. And so what I see is a lot of times as pastors' kids, they value education, they have purpose, and then they're like, wait a minute, I can work hard and I can really make money. So I would say that, I became a devout capitalist at a very early age. I just really wanted to be occupationally where I could work a lot of hours if I want to, and I could get well compensated if I want to. I didn't know growing up that I was dyslexic. I didn't find out until I was in my 40s, but that really, gave a lot of context when I did. I was born in Fort Lauderdale. We moved 9 times. So I lived all over the state. That's part of being a Methodist. And then probably also the reason why the dyslexia wasn't diagnosed. All state public school system all the way through, and then went to Florida State University for my bachelor's degree in real estate. Graduated in 93, and I kind of put my nose to the grindstone and worked like a wild man for about 25 straight years. So,
my family did not grow up with a faith-based family. Came to that later in my life, but we moved 21 times. By the time we got here, I was 14 and 21 times. And it was just like a lot of moving. My dad was a contractor and in the defense sector. So we moved around. He was also Air Force guard. So still moved around a lot. So you learn how to make friends, and you're right. Sometimes diagnoses don't show up right away. My youngest brother, we believe that he was probably bipolar. So there's some things that can slip through the cracks and you don't discover it till later. How did you figure out in your 40s that you were dyslexic?
So when I got diagnosed with clinical depression during that season, I had to go to my doctor all the time. And I was very thankful for it. I had the same doctor for like 26 years. Hard to believe that 26 was the same primary doctor. And so when I would see him every single month or however it was during that season, like one of those times, he was like, I think you're dyslexic. And I don't know how he picked up on that, but we were just spending a lot of time together. And then I went online and I took a thing, a little test or whatever, and I tested absolutely dyslexic,
Wow.
and it made complete sense. It's like if you visualize, like if I were to write just my name, John, I write JHNO. Like that's just very
Mm,
common. I write it out of order. But I will tell you that when I graduated from FSU, I graduated with a 2.9 GPA.
mhm.
Here's the deal. I never skipped class. I went to every study hall. I got every tutor I could. I earned that
Oh,
2.9.
yeah.
Like that was the highest I could possibly get.
Mhm.
I was ashamed about that for most of my adult life.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah, well, because my private shame was like, I'm stupid,
No.
So 20 years after I graduated, I got inducted to the FSU College Business Hall of Fame, and I was the youngest one ever. And fortunately, I'd been diagnosed, and so I was able to say at the induction ceremony, tell that story. And that, for most of my life, I just would have been so embarrassed for people to know what my GPA was. And now I'm like, this is my story. This is my GPA. And it's not like I didn't make effort. I made huge effort, but
Mhm.
I don't learn in a traditional way.
Mhm.
Right. But that's been good for me. It's been humbling for me, but it's also been a relief to me to know, like, no, I'm not dumb. I learn differently.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. And you know what? That's interesting that you raised that because, my life, I had told you before we came on the air, it's been around education. And something that, we know that there's auditory learners, that there's visual learners, and there's kinetic, which is all hands on. But I approach it from more of a multidimensional
Sure.
approach. And I'm pretty sure you're going to be on the same page. There's so many variables. I've worked with the Center for Independent Living, but I've also worked with the National Association on Mental Illness in Greater Orlando, NAMIGO. And one of the things in each of these organizations that I learned is it says 1 in 5, when I was working with Namigo at that time, 1 in 5 has some type of a mental or emotional disability. And I went, that is a flippin' lie. It is 1 in 5 does not have it because the rest of us are not admitting it,
Right.
So I feel like statistically that is probably not accurate. So when you're looking at different people, you see the different dimensions. There's dyslexic, there's the whole spectrum of some type of mental or emotional disorders that are in there that impacts how you learn. There are personality types, there is birth order, there is whatever generation you were born into. It's not just even those factors, it's so much more than that. Your race, your ethnicity, your gender, everything impacts how you actually learn and absorb, because those that were born into millennials, we'll say, and obviously Gen Z, but even, the Gen X, they had video games. And so gamification has become huge and it continues to, morph, as well as augmented reality and virtual reality. And how people learn is still going to change. We're used to, you and I grew up in a time where it was lecture and it was one direction. There wasn't always a lot of group work, anything like that. So if you had those types of opportunities, your 2.9 could have actually ended up being a 4 because it's hitting you in the right places. Dyslexic would have been identified earlier. You should have been able to, thrive. I'm surprised that people didn't notice you switching the letters, because
Well,
people in education should have picked up on that.
there were breadcrumbs. I mean, I can think back now. I remember a teacher or two saying something about that.
Hmm.
But I think the other thing that was part of the problem is I was a good kid.
Oh, yeah.
I was quiet. I was good. And so because I wasn't causing any trouble, it was like, okay, just, move them on through.
Hmm.
But I'll add something to everything you just said. And that is trauma has a lot to do with all this stuff
I
too.
agree.
And that I think there's a lot of really successful people that if we studied them, we would find that part of it is overcompensating trauma. I'm going to give you an example for myself. If you look at my LinkedIn profile and you look at it and go, oh my gosh, this guy is really successful. And in a kind of secular, how we look at the world way,
Hmm.
I guess that's true. What I had to learn, and I learned this in my 40s, is that my addiction as an adult, 20s, 30s, and 40s, was success. And what I mean by that is that I had no comprehension or skill set of how to feel my feelings. And so when something traumatic would happen to me, instead of like sitting in that and being sad and crying and processing, I would just go after another deal or another
Hmm.
promotion. And so when you're looking at my LinkedIn profile, part of what you're looking at is an addict, right? And so I've gone through all kinds of level of recovery. I use a lot of recovery language. And so, I was not addicted to drugs or anything like that. And I know a lot of people that have come through that have so much wisdom to share, and they've helped me. But it was a addiction to success.
Everybody has that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if everybody has that.
I
but
really do believe that, whether it's working out or playing games or cooking or eating or success. I mean, we're all seeking something in life that's affirming as to who we are and maybe what our purpose is. You're extremely high IQ in the sense of emotional and self-awareness. I would put you over there in that category because, you've shared in this, I don't know, 20 minutes, so much about yourself. And I went, wow, you have learned a lot about yourself and you really recognize your strengths, your challenges. You've persevered through those. You're willing to share those. So, that vulnerable little box, you're checking it for sure.
That's good.
Yeah, because I think that a lot of our listeners are going to be able to identify, no matter where they are in that generation of their life and their growth.
Well, it's look, one of the things that you'll hear me talk a lot about is the subject of suicide. And when I talk about suicide, we can look at Anthony Bourdain or Kate Spade or Robin Williams or Aaron Hernandez. I mean, I could go on and on and on. It's shocking. It is shocking the number. It's like, I remember I was working on the suicide walk a couple of weeks ago, raising awareness on suicide prevention. I just started Googling celebrities commit suicide. And it's like the list goes, it's endless. And it's every category. They all look beautiful and they're perfect looking, and they ended their own lives. Like, how did this happen? And so that's the thing I keep trying to look through. When the Great Recession happened, 5 different men I knew in real estate committed suicide.
No.
In Orlando.
Like locally.
Local people. And so that really hit me hard. And then several years ago, I lost a dear friend of mine to suicide. And it was like, I mean, that it
feels like a punch in the face, right?
Oh, well, and it was somebody I was mentoring on top of that. And
oh my goodness.
I'll tell you this quick story about he was a huge Superman fan. And so if in the Superman movie, Superman dies and Batman at his funeral says, "I failed you in life. I will not fail you in death." And so every year on his birthday, I post that on his Facebook page. "I failed you in life. I will not fail you in death." And the first time I posted it, a bunch of people were like, John, it's okay. You didn't really fail him. And I'm like, look, don't freak out. What I'm saying is that when that happened, I did not have the skill set to help him. Like he was suffering in a way I didn't know. And what I'm trying to say is now I can onboard those skills and try to be helpful to other people. Right. But what I'm saying is that we see these people who will check the boxes of success and then they end their life. And so you're around a lot of great young minds. And some of these people that you're coaching and leading, they're going to do exceptional things. Some of them are going to do exceptional things, but they're still hurt. There's still that wound. And so trying to help them find that path. The other thing I'll say, just to jump on this real quick, is when people are super successful monetarily, specifically, there are a lot of people around them who don't want them to get healing because they're making money, right? And I would argue that maybe the people around Michael Jackson or Prince or some other business people I've seen that I know, I mean, in the personal examples I can think of, people around them knew this person was really suffering, but it was in their financial best interest to help them stop.
Yeah. People will often think that money will solve a lot of problems, and it can, give stability. That's for sure.
Sure.
But it does not make you happy. My mother, she died of leukemia, and it was 4 rounds of going through the chemo. My brother and I, we watched her go through this, and I know I would stay in the hospital with her, every night during that time frame because she was afraid to be by herself. She was afraid to die. Honestly, I know that was part of what was going on there. And in retrospect, both my brother and I, we just went, no, we would not want to go through that, because for me, I'm at peace. I know where I'm going. I know who my God is. So no worries there. But on the same hand, I think that there's a lot of people that are lost, whether it's, faith-based or lost because they're caught up in what this world is or what somebody else is expecting of them. I mean, you're describing so much pain
Yeah.
truly pain in the world.
It's fascinating. I've been to a lot of funerals. And part of that's getting older, when you have the generation above you and you lose people. And just in the work I do, because I interact with people a lot, I see different loss. I've lost probably 6 different men who I was involved in groups with who passed away with hospice.
Mm,
And all 6 of those guys, it was very, very peaceful. And, when you're sitting with somebody with hospice and they're just wearing what they're sleeping in, and maybe
mhm.
they have like a bracelet on or something, and this is it. And then oh my gosh, every single time I have looked at these men and said, is there anything you want? Is there anything I could do for you?
Mhm,
And I'm always thinking maybe sometimes I go like, can I have your watch?
mhm.
Something like that. They never do. The only one was funny. My uncle, he said, no, nothing. Then he went to the restroom and then he came back and he said, could you check on your aunt more? And I
Mhm,
said, sure. So I
mhm,
check on Aunt Sandy very regularly because
mhm,
he asked me to do that. Right.
mhm.
But that's just context. Now, the flip side is that people will say, nobody in their deathbed wish they worked more or whatever.
Yeah.
That's also false. And I'll tell you why. There are many, many, many people that die alone. And part of the reason why they die alone is that the people that are related to them have to work, right?
Mhm,
So there is a balance. There is absolute importance in working hard and being good stewards with your money and
mhm,
helping your family. And then also having good context of relationships and things like that. Like
mhm.
it's a balance of both.
Yeah, I was going to say balance for
Balance of
sure.
both, for sure.
Yeah.
And so let me say this. I got the American Diabetes Association Father of the Year Award. And then as a dad, you give a speech and your kids speak, and it's all cool. But one of the things I said that I think no one in the room really understood what I was saying was I said, I want my daughters to know that when I'm gone and they look back at me, they're going to realize that I made a bunch of mistakes. And
Mhm.
I want them to know they have my blessing to be angry with me.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
And that they can acknowledge like, man, dad was terrible at that. And that's okay. They don't have to feel guilty about acknowledging that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where you can have real love of people. When I talk about civil rights work, I would say use the line. I think it was Malcolm X that said it, but it's like untreated wounds don't heal. Right.
Mhm.
So you can't just be like, let's just not talk about these things from the past. Doesn't make them go away. Of course, talking about them doesn't mean we have to relive them and they're awful.
Mhm.
Talking about them is the ability to then move past it. So if you and I had a mutual friend that was a survivor of being sold in the sex slave business,
Mhm.
and we really cared about that person, one of the ways we can help them heal is listen to their story.
Mhm.
Now, I don't
Mhm.
know about you, I don't want to hear that story. That's a terrible story. It's awful. But if we care about that person,
You
we
push it
listen.
aside and
Yeah,
you listen.
yeah. You listen to the story so that they can help get their life back,
Mhm.
right? It's a very hard thing. It's a
Mhm.
very hard thing.
It is. Well, let's talk about your other businesses that you have now.
Sure.
So, which one was your first one that you started? How did you get to, you have, I know Crossman Conversations, that's your podcast, that's new. You also have Crossman Career Builders, which I think has been around for, I don't know, it's 2017, maybe
Mhm.
somewhere around there.
Ish,
And
yeah.
then you also have Crossmark Services, but you had some other businesses before to
Sure.
get you where you
Sure.
are now.
Yeah. So I have a lot of my background that's, kind of traditional, we would say business,
Are you commercial real estate
all
or resident?
commercial, all
Okay.
commercial.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
where
know.
the money is.
Well, I don't know. That's where the money, there's a lot of money in resident. There's a lot of money anywhere in real estate if you work hard at it, but I just don't know anything about residential. Here's what I would tell you is that in 2019, I sold my company. And the main push on that was both my mom and my wife were having some very serious health issues. And I have 2 teenage daughters. And so I really needed to do like a reboot of my
Mhm.
life and try to figure out what I was doing. So during that season, I mean, I was like really trying to figure life out, what's going on. And both my wife and my mom at different points said, you don't have to be here all the time, which is a
Mhm.
nice way of saying it out. So who I went and met with was Al Weiss, who's a former CEO of Disney,
Mhm.
Central Florida guy. And I said, look, here's what's going on. What do you recommend? And he said that I should hire a transitions coach. I had no idea what that meant,
Mhm.
but I hired the same company that he did when he left Disney. And so, it's kind of pricey and it's a ton of time. And they do all these different psychological things, all these tests, and they go through all this stuff. And at the end of it, they give you this book on you, which is kind of fun. And one of the things they do is they match you with jobs, right?
Mhm.
And so they're like, I'm not making this up. As a florist, I scored a 27. That's an F.
Mhm.
As an architect, I scored a -32.
Okay.
Like that's bad, So my top 4 jobs, number 4 was like a counselor consultant.
Oh, I would have picked that right off the bat.
There you go. Number 3 was politician. Number 2 was real estate executive. And number 1 was pastor. And I just decided at that moment, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be those 4 things. And I'm just going to do those as they come at me. And then the other thing was they have this like graph, the chart thing, and they have like this bullseye is like traditional CEO, and then bullseye is like COO, and when I tested in the CEO box, but right kind of on the line, kind of close. And when the guy was sharing this with me, I felt like he was nervous, like I was going to get mad and be like, no, I'm a bullseye CEO. And I didn't feel that way. Actually, I felt really relieved. And I felt like, oh, okay, well, I'm non-traditional, right? And that's where I kind of, at that point was really starting to embrace my entrepreneurshipness, because while I could help some companies in some ways, if I was working there, it doesn't totally fit with who I am. And I'm making people crazy. The other thing I would say that I learned in that process is that I have a good skill set at the implementation of innovation. Okay.
Yes.
So if a person is like, hey, I want to change, I can help them. If a nonprofit's like, hey, I want to change, I can help them. If a corporation wants to change, I can help them, or a real estate project. But if they don't want to change, it's a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
So FAMU College of Law, historically Black college located in downtown Orlando, one of 6 Black law schools in America. They graduate more Black lawyers than all the other state law schools combined every semester.
Oh, yeah.
So when they came to me and asked me to be their chairman of their Dean's Advisory Council, you think that's kind of crazy because I'm not a lawyer and I'm white. But they were going through some stuff. They needed some transition. And so that was a great match, like nonprofit that wanted to change. And so that worked out really well. So today I have a company called Crossmark Services. That is a real estate company. Our primary role is investing in real estate. We do some advisory work, some brokerage work, but all kind of revolves around investing. I'm on the property. I have 2 different properties under contract right now, and I'm working on a development piece as well. So that's where I make money and do my thing. I work part-time, and I'm not full-time cranking it, but that's my world.
So why MARC instead of MARK?
That is my partner's children's initials.
Gotcha.
So I have a business partner, and he and I work on it together. So that's what that is. And it's funny because we have all these ownership entities, and they have that same name in them. So that's a combination. Then I have Crossman Career Builders. Crossman Career Builders is what my books are under.
Right. You gifted me with one. I know nobody can see it, but here I'm showing it for the overhead view. There we go.
So I have that book, and then my mom's 2 books underneath that.
Wait, she has 2? I thought it was just 1.
No, she has a book of poetry called New Day.
Okay.
As a side note, she wrote that in the 60s and 70s as a gift to her. Last year, I republished it for her. We added in there a poem she wrote about Dr. King's funeral. She was at Dr. King's funeral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a great poem. So that's cool. So I have those books, and I have 2 more books in the queue. So all those books come across from Career Builders. I also have 10 endowed scholarships at 7 universities. Those are all underneath Cross Career Builders. Cross Career Builders is a for-profit company that I own by myself, but it really is kind of a break even at best. I do some consulting out of that. I do some guest lecturing out of that. If COVID hadn't happened, I may have ramped more into that because more public speaking. There's that. The third company, which I've just started, I hadn't told you about this yet, but it relates. It's the Crossman Foundation, which is my nonprofit.
Nice.
The Crossman Conversation is going to move underneath that.
Okay.
And so that way, when people sponsor that radio show podcast, it's a charitable donation. So on the Crossman Conversation, the Crossman Foundation, that's where I'm really trying to raise awareness on issues on race, addiction, mental health, and suicide prevention. So you'll hear me talk a lot about historically Black colleges and the work I do there. That's all within that. So it's really 3 things. And so real estate, where I make my money, but I have very few clients. It's in a very few partners. I don't really promote that much, but Crossman Career Builders is broad, the books and all that. And then the foundation is broad and trying to make its impact into the world.
This second book that your mother's written, because obviously there's writing, was your mom also a teacher by chance?
She was not. I mean, my parents got married young and then had kids young, and there was
Hmm.
4 of us, so she was
Yeah.
really doing that. But she was always a writer. And in
Hmm.
fact, her mother, who passed away very young, had written poetry. We added one of those poems to the book as well. But my mom's always been a writer. She's 83. She loves it when I bring that up. She's still writing.
Your
And
mom looks great too.
oh,
I
thank
saw
you.
her picture.
Thank you. I appreciate
She
it.
looks great.
She so about 9 years ago, she'd written this novel, and I kept sort of just pushing it out of her, in that she wasn't really ready to share it with the world, but it's historic fiction. And so she had a friend who was he was like a history buff, history teacher or something that
Is it by chance related to A Land Remembered?
no, but it's similar in the
Like
same,
that type of a genre?
yeah, it's same genre.
It
Same,
was historical. Land Remembered was, truly a book about Florida and how the people at that time frame, late 1800s, were transversing across the I-4
Mhm.
across the state, and what that was like. And it's a little reminiscent of like Laura Ingalls Wilder's books and anything. If you grew up with the Waltons, it's going to be like that. And I'm thinking your mom's book is something in that type of
Yeah, it's the same.
storytelling.
It's in the 1880s, and so it's a story. So the story is not true, but all the different places they visit and what's going on around them is historically,
Accurate.
from that
Mhm.
perspective. So she had this person who was a history person, read the book, really liked it. And so I just kept pushing her, like, Mom, like, let's get it published, get it out there. And one of the things is about, my parents didn't inherit anything, and that's not something I need or want from them. But I do think that there's some things that I like photos, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you have a great family photo, it doesn't mean like one person gets it. You can make a copy, everybody has the photo.
Mhm.
So to me, it's the same thing with my mom's books. She would be like, well, we can just have a few copies made. I'm like, Mom, look, if you get it on Amazon, everybody forever can have as many copies as they
She
want.
can actually make the funds that are come out of there go towards some cause that she's
Sure.
super passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been, in my mind, part of the book process. It's been a gift to my siblings and their kids and their grandkids, that they all have as many copies as they ever want to get access to it. So that's been fun. And I
Mhm.
think it's been good for her, that she works in the book, doesn't work in the book, and then gets to push into it. So it's been very cool.
What I like about that too is I would go to my parents, my grandparents, and say, "So tell me the stories of when we were kids. I want to hear them, and I'd love it if you would record them into some type of an audio file so I can go back and listen to them." And so when I call my dad, he's in Oklahoma, and it's usually about every week, but sometimes it's every other week. I go, "Okay, tell me another story," and I find that precious. So I think that her writing this story is something that should have a lot of meaning to everybody in your family, because they will remember her that way, because there's actual physical tangible books that you can go and pull from and say, yeah, that was my grandmother or my great grandmother or my mom or my sister, whatever.
I would say yes, and it's messy. It's
It is
complicated.
messy, sure.
I had dinner with Martin Luther King the third one time, and we were, obviously it's very different with him, but there is a context of when you have parents who have done things, civil rights and things like that. There's a cost. There's a cost to the family. People
Yep.
don't always can make that connection, but there is. But when my mom, when she had her book of poetry, and then somebody I know was reading some of the poems, and they're like, John, you should have somebody come read all these and record all these. And I said, listen, I appreciate that you enjoy my mom's poetry. You got to understand that some of those poems, many of those poems, you're reading in an appreciation of the words, you're reading and appreciating historic context. I'm hearing my mother's pain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not necessarily enjoyable to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for my grandchildren who will never meet my mom, right?
They'll have a different perspective.
They'll have a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so there's a generation removed, right?
Yeah.
So my mother, my grandfather Crossman was born in the 1800s, right? So you think about that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's grandmother, who helped raise her, was born almost the same year as Custer's Last Stand. Right?
Holy cow.
So if you think about, if we had those people interviewed or whatever, think about the perspective. But we also know that, man, all that stuff's messy and hurtful and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I'm really glad that I did it. I'm really glad for the context of it. At the same time, am I totally ready to break down every line and every poem and every chapter of that book with my mom? Probably not. And she's probably not either, but that's okay. Right.
Mhm.
That's okay. I had the vision for what I wanted to do, which was a gift to future generation, a gift to her, obviously honoring my mother,
Mhm.
but also those future generations, which is pretty cool.
We're going to take a moment just to acknowledge our sponsor. So thank you, Cat 5 Studios.
The Intern Whisperer is brought to you by Cat 5 Studios, who help you create games and videos for your training and marketing needs that are out of this world. Visit Cat 5 Studios for more information to learn how Cat 5 Studios can help your business. Thank you, Cat 5 Studios.
And we are back to our show. So, a reminder to all of our guests, this is John Crossman. And I want to say thank you for being here on the show. We're going to switch gears and go and look at the future of what do you think 2030 is going to look like with real estate, because you have an interest in there, in education, and also if you want, we can throw, radio and nonprofit, everything that you were talking about in the first half of the show. But we'll start with the impact that COVID has had on business. It totally changed how we went to school, how we worshiped, how we would grocery shop, how we did anything, right? Because now everybody was essentially a prisoner in their home for a little while.
Right. Here's the first observation I'll make. I was in college when the AIDS epidemic was really ramping up, and you would hear about Arthur Ashe or Magic Johnson. It was like almost like every day you'd hear this different thing, and it was crazy and it was scary. And I took a biology class, and the biology class was divided into 4 sections, and the class had 1,500 students. So one section was human anatomy, and another section, and then one higher section was on AIDS. And the professor taught us, and this is around 1990, 91, where it was, that AIDS would become the #1 killer of heterosexual men in the next 5 years. Remember, that was like a test question. And I remember thinking at that age, 19-year-old John Crossman was like, there's no way this is true. And I also remember thinking, we need then to focus our AIDS education resources on the most vulnerable communities.
Yes.
Now, going forward, I think that one of the things that's come out of this, will keep coming out of this, that since the dawn of man till today, technology's always been a thing, right? Technology always, and that changes things, changes warfare, changes business, changes structure. And so we always need to be investing in technology. We need to always be investing in communication. Like that's the most important thing. All that said, we are pack animals, man. We were not meant to be alone. We're not meant to be cooped
we're meant
up.
for relationship.
We're meant for relationships. We're meant to be an eye to eye. We're meant to be talking to people. And I think that is a huge, huge thing that's come out of this. So what does that mean? Well, to me, it's like, it means a lot of things, but when radio came out, it was supposed to be the death of live stage, right? And then movies came out to kill radio, and TV came to kill movies, and then we keep going. Well, pre-pandemic, how was Hamilton doing? Pretty great.
Yeah, pretty great.
That's 5 things away. That was supposed to be dead 100 years ago, right? So I keep coming back to, we have a need for human connectivity. I think we have a need for passion and excellence. And I think a lot of things we see throughout society become very mediocre or stale or kind of heartless. And so when people are able to step in that and do things well, they're going to do well, right? So, I think that a lot of times people get divorced too fast sometimes.
Oh yeah. They don't
Like,
want to do the work.
Right. I always see when people get married when they have young babies. I'm always like, life gets better. Having young babies is really hard. Life gets better. I think that when you have a small business, it's really hard. Like,
oh, this is not for babies either. Having
right.
a business is like, they say, oh, it's your baby. No, it's not.
Yeah, it's really hard. And so what I just come back to say is that I think that for people who are achievers, they can make great things happen. I look at churches, for example, and, if you want to have a great worship service, you can pull up your phone and play great music, or you can hear you pull up Andy Stanley, Rick Warren, anywhere you want, right? But what you can't do is connectivity. And so the importance of visiting people in the hospital, the importance of visiting people in prison, the importance of visiting people who are in crisis. And sometimes it's just sitting with people, not saying anything. Sometimes it's just hugging people. So,
people need 7 touches a day. And that just means like somebody's hand on another hand, feeling the warmth of that hand on somebody. It just transforms,
right.
Somebody's whole energy on the inside of them.
That's absolutely correct. And I had a friend of mine whose dad was in an assisted living facility in his 90s, and the assistant.
How often are they hugged?
Well,
Yeah.
so during the pandemic, they were told they can't come see him. He started doing really bad,
Yeah.
and so they just ended up saying like, we're gonna force away, and then we're gonna hug him. Now, thankfully, he never got COVID, and he got better.
Yeah.
Right. And again, there's a trade-off. At some point, it's like, well, maybe just let him get COVID, because it'd be better if he have COVID and pass than go. He's going to leave at some point soon anyway. He's in his 90s. Right. So I think that, to me, that's like going back to what's the real message? What's the real lesson of all this? It's the importance of community. It's the importance of relationships, the importance of those mental health issues. And, mental health is not mental illness, right? Like mental health is just like human health, like practicing good, healthy things and making sure we're doing them in healthy ways. Right. So those are sort of my quick, big things. I think as far as job goes, I will tell you that I come to my office every day.
A physical office.
I come to my physical office every day. I also have a really cool at-home office, which I use a lot too. But I will tell you, like, there's a lot, nothing beats being, in person. Like, it just doesn't.
Agreed.
And I'll tell you this, it's like conferences, right? Like, to me, like, I've been to different kind of things on Zoom, and it's good. There's some good things happen there, but there's nothing like being face to face. Even like if you're on a board and then you have a break between it and you get to just talk to somebody about their kids or whatever. There have been some boards I sit on that it's just not the same until we get to where we're really meeting regularly face to face. The relationships just aren't there. I've seen that so much, and there's an importance of it. So I'm thankful that we live in a time, and I think we'll continue to be in a time where people can have flexibility. I know some people just might want to listen. I could argue really hard. It'd be really nice to stay in my pajamas every single day, but it's not good for me, right? I like to eat donuts every single day too. That's not good for me.
Right.
So there's a point of just pushing yourself to sometimes what you don't want to do, but it's the right thing to do to be healthy.
Agreed. And it also goes into just being able to have social skills and develop those. I think that when people become more isolated, they become more stressed out over, oh my gosh, I've got to go talk to people. There's no rewind. There's no edit. I have to be able to say something, and then people are going to judge me on whatever it is that I said, all of those things. Yet if we get out there and we just have regular conversations with people, it's going to be okay.
Well, when my girls were younger, we would go to Publix together, and I'd say, okay, we're going to grocery shopping, and here's the thing: you need to go find these 5 items for me. Well, Dad, I don't know where this is. Well, go find it.
Go find it.
Well, Dad, I can't find it. I'm like, do you see that guy over there with the green shirt on? Like, go ask him.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And then I would have them call and make dinner reservations, or call and order food. Or I remember traveling one time, we needed to get a hotel room, and so I had my one daughter on speakerphone, make the hotel reservation. Right. And so, I mean, I knew that the world was going to teach them how to deal with technology. And of course, they're great at that, but really leaning in that personal humanity.
That's a valuable skill that you were teaching them. I remember my mother had taught all of us to be able to cook. My father made us all go out there, and my brothers, I have 2 brothers, they were able to change the oil in the car, change the tires, all of that. My dad would sit there and say, you're going to hand me tools and you're going to learn them. And it was really a good thing. I was 12 going, why do I have to hand you a socket wrench, or a Phillips screwdriver? But I learned the names of those things. And I would go into a mechanic's store and I would be right, and the mechanic was wrong twice. And they went, yeah, but you're a woman. And how did you know this? And I went, well, first off, that's not appropriate to say. But secondly, my dad and my brothers, they taught me this stuff. So yeah, I do know these things.
Well, I'll tell you what, all that, and I'd say being able to fix a toilet. I can fix a toilet really well, and like that is something that most.
Do you think millennials and Gen Zs know that? They don't. They order their food and it's brought to them.
Yeah, so I think that those are, again, I think that. Well, let me say this: I've guest lectured at colleges for 25 years, and in the last 3 years, students have really amazed me with their increased mental health skills. And there's some things that millennials and Gen Z are better at. They're better at.
Oh, technology. Woo, they can run circles around many of us.
Yeah, I'd say technology, but I also be able to express their feelings. I'll give you a great example. I gave a lecture at FSU, When I got done, a student walked up to me and she said, "Thank you for your humanity." It was a very interesting compliment. So later that day, I saw a friend of mine who's a retired bank president. And I told her, I said, yeah, the student came up to me and said, "Thank you for humanity." She looked at me and she goes, "What in the hell did that mean?" And I thought that is really funny. Like that's a generational gap.
Yeah,
right.
it
You
is.
know, I knew what the student meant,
I do too.
but that 60-plus-year-old bank president did not know. Right.
Yeah.
So there are things that they're good at and they can teach us. But then there's other things that they need to keep working on too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Confidence.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. You know, it's
confidence.
funny. I was University of Florida. I was lecturing at a graduate school program thing.
Mhm.
Most of these kids, never ended up being in their life, and a ton of them were getting a second master's degree or whatever.
Mm.
And if I described the biggest problem I saw them facing in one word, it was fear. I
Mhm.
mean, my gosh, they're just terrified. They're terrified to send an email and ask somebody for coffee, or
Mhm.
send an email and ask to job shadow. All the time, I tell these students, like, here's all these things I think are important for you to do. One of them is, I'll like, connect to me on LinkedIn. I'll say, follow my company on LinkedIn, connect to me on LinkedIn, talk about the importance of handwritten notes. And my friends would always be like, "John, do you get like hundreds of letters? Do you have all these kids reach out to me?" I'm like, nope. Like, it doesn't matter what I say, about 4% do it.
Mhm.
About
Yeah.
4%.
Yeah. And how many of them will see the value of what LinkedIn is it is not the same as any other social channels where
Right.
you're just, there is a little bit of crossover I've seen in LinkedIn where, people are doing things that are also on TikTok or on,
Right.
Instagram and Facebook. But for the most part, it stays pretty true to that professional
Mhm.
definition of what we're supposed to behave in the world. They don't get that sometimes.
That's true.
They go, well, I want to be on this social channel and this. I go, but
Well, I a lot of times I'll tell students that I'll post something on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But if you see the same post, it's written differently.
Mhm.
It's written differently.
Mhm.
And so
different audiences.
different audience. And,
Yeah.
and it could be the same thing. It's just twisted differently. But
Mhm.
I always think, your LinkedIn page is like, it's your brand. It's your
Yep.
storefront. Right. And so trying to take the time to make sure if somebody comes across that and they know who they're dealing with, and you don't have to get on every personal issue. I don't talk about
Mhm.
every personal issue,
Mhm.
but what I do talk about is, again, in the context of business. And so that somebody understands who I am and what I'm all about. Well, let me say this. I always tell college students when I lecture, I always say this. My closing thing is always, the day you graduate from your college,
Mhm.
send an email to the president and say, "Dear President,"
Yeah, whoever.
insert, "thank you for having me at this great institution. I'm graduating. I would like to thank the following people."
Mhm.
And then list out all the
Yeah,
the
the
professors,
professors.
faculty, whoever. It could be an RA, could be
Yeah.
coach, whatever. List them all out. And then say, "As I'm graduating, I'm joining the Alumni Association, and please let me know how I can help you." Right.
Mhm.
Boom. When you hit send an email, copy all those people. Copy all
Mhm.
those people. And here's the thing. When the people get copied on the email, they will cry.
Yes, they will.
They will print it out. And the day they die and they're cleaning out the person's desk, they're going to find that. Now, it's a crazy true story. If you look inside the book, Curriculars, Career Builders, I dedicated in part to my high school teacher, Dr. Les Coslow, who was my most influential high school teacher. Dr. Coslow passed away about a year and a half ago in a motorcycle accident.
Oh, that's sad.
And so they didn't have the funeral until last April. And so when they did, his widow contacted me and asked me to come speak. So I went and spoke at Dr. Coslow's funeral.
Mhm.
A few months later, his wife contacted me.
Mhm.
Now check this out. She was cleaning out his desk, found a handwritten note from me
Mhm.
from 1995,
Wow.
thanking him. All those years
Mhm.
up until 2020,
Mhm.
it had been in his desk, right? I'd forgotten that. I didn't remember that when I said, but I tell students, like, you don't understand the power you have. And so think about, like, here's another one for you. I was on a board for FAMU, and the president asked a group of us, like, "Hey, these legislators have done a really great job. They've been supportive of FAMU. Can you write them all handwritten notes?" Sure. I didn't know these legislators. I couldn't tell you the person's name today, but I got a little card, wrote a handwritten note. "Thanks for supporting FAMU. I really appreciate it. Please want to do it for you, John Crossman." Sent to him. A few months later, a friend of mine is a lobbyist. He was in the state rep's office and he saw my note tacked to the wall,
Right.
tacked to the wall. And so I tell students, like, why would that be? Because when you're a politician or you're a CEO or you're a college president, you get complaint.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone takes the time
Mm-hmm.
to say something like that. And so to your comment,
Yeah.
it's not too late. Somebody listening to this right now who's 24 years old, they could write a letter to their middle school teacher. They could write a letter to high school. They could write a letter to the parent. They could do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest daughter is 18 and she graduates from high school this May. And we're going to do a fun, party for her and stuff like that. And so I told her, I said, we can do this party and you can invite anybody you want. I said, who do you want to invite? She mentioned her kindergarten teacher who we're still in touch with.
How sweet.
Yeah. And she mentioned her French teacher from middle school. And I told her, I was like, sweetie, invite them. And even if they don't come, the fact that they get that invitation.
Oh, yeah.
That at 18 years old and it's 12th grade, she's looking back at kindergarten and says, I remember Miss Tusarelli. She was impactful in my life. I want to make sure.
I have those stories.
Right?
And it means everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
It means everything. And that's humanity.
Mm-hmm.
That's humanity. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think when people know that and they feel that, and look, that translates into a church. It translates into a school. It translates to a company. Like imagine if you're running a business and you exude that out of you. People want to do business with you.
I will tell you, I have 4 people that have stayed on this journey with me to launch Employers for Change. And one is on the software side and the other 3 are over on my game. I do not take this lightly. They have stayed on this journey with me and they, without being paid, except for the software developer, he got paid in the last year finally.
Sure.
But the thing is I said, why are you still here? You guys could go anywhere. You have enough years of experience. You could get a job. And they go, no, we believe in you. We believe in what you're doing. And we're here with you for this, how long it takes. Well, that payoff for them is going to be really big because they're going to get equity in this company and they don't even know what it is yet.
Right. Sure.
And I take that very seriously. I have people that intern with me and they write me these notes and they put those recommendations on my LinkedIn. And it's the same thing for me. It's very meaningful. It's very impactful because I invest in them because I know they're investing in here. So it's a mutual exchange of energy, of knowledge for sure. And just the gift of presence, I would say.
I would say too, we talked a little bit about anger. One of the things that gets me angry is people who I've helped out and then I see them not helping out other people. And then I have some people I help out and they always acknowledge it. Like and I try to do it with the people that help me out. And then some people don't acknowledge it at all. And I don't ever, wish for bad things on them or anything like that. Nothing like that. But again, what did I say? Charity has an end. It just does. It doesn't work that way. It ends. And so if I feel like, man, I've helped this person and then it's just not ever, I just stop it because there's other people in need.
Sure.
Right.
It has to be.
It just ends. And I think that also those people miss the blessing of being in relationships and in life with a big L.
Well, we are at the end of our show. We've gone over, but just so you know, anything that goes over, it goes into this outtake side and it continues to play out there. The editing team, they'll make it sound more cohesive, but
Cool.
It will be over there in the outtake. So how can our listeners find you? I'm sharing your LinkedIn profile, but I'm going to let you share whatever you want them to engage with you.
CrossmanCB.com, the website, CrossmarkServices.com website. There's both those websites. Crossmark Services, Crossman Career Builders is on LinkedIn and Facebook, right? And then I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook personally. Anybody can follow me or connect to me. I'm also on Instagram if you want to see pictures of my dog.
Ooh, what kind of a dog?
Great Dane. Her name's Pepper.
Love those dogs.
She's a sweetie pie. And I'm also on Twitter. So, I am very accessible. Somebody wants to find me, they absolutely find me. And if they message me, I will message them back for sure. So they're welcome to.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to take a moment to share. Thank you to our sponsor, Cat 5 Studios, to our production team, our video interns, Chase McDowell, David Ullman, Efren Cuevas, and Keisha Perez. Music is by Sophie Lloyd, and sound effects are Eric Peterson, Matt Miller, Dave Francis, and Miguel Sintra. We would love to have your inclusion tip of the week shared on our show. So be sure to record it, in your voice, send an audio file to info@internpursuit.tech, TECH, and include your name, job role, and where you work, and we will email you our Intern Pursuit game backgrounds for your next video conference call and have your voice be heard on our radio. So thank you, John. I really want to say this has been a blast. It's been long overdue. I've been, a fan of yours. You just didn't know it. Been following stuff that you put out there, and I went, this man he's got lots of wisdom to share. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.